What hidden truths have been submerged beneath the waters of time? What did the world look like before the great flood? Imagine a time so distant and mysterious, filled with giants who roamed the earth, people who lived for hundreds of years, and creatures that no longer exist today. This was the Antediluvian period, a world that defies modern understanding. But what really happened in that ancient time before the flood washed everything away? Did people truly live for centuries? Was there lost wisdom, spiritual advancement, or divine knowledge that was swept away with the waters? And most importantly, why was the old world destroyed in such a catastrophic way? The Antediluvian period, a term from the Latin words ante meaning before and diluvium meaning flood, refers to a time before the Great Flood, as described in the Bible's book of Genesis. It was a time of great mystery, where life was radically different from what we know today. How did humans live for such a long time? Were they more spiritually connected to God, possessing wisdom and knowledge that we can no longer comprehend? Before the biblical flood erased this ancient world to birth a new one, what was life truly like? Welcome to a world of myth and legend, where the flood appears in global traditions as both a warning and an explanation for the origins of humanity. The story of a great flood is a recurring theme in many mythologies, often serving as a cautionary tale about humanity's disobedience or spiritual downfall. In Mesopotamian legends such as the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis epic, characters like Utnapishtim and Atrahasis are warned by the gods to build boats to escape the deluge. Similar tales exist in Hindu mythology, where Manu receives a divine warning from a fish, an avatar of the god Vishnu. In Greek mythology, Deucalion and Pyrrha survive a flood sent by Zeus, repopulating the earth through a unique ritual involving stones. In Native American Hopi tradition, the deity Setunok causes a flood, sparing only the faithful who are guided underground by the ant people. Flood myths exist across cultures, but the question remains, what was the world like before these floods? Accounts of the Antediluvian period often describe a world that was dramatically different from today. Biblical texts, along with other ancient accounts, depict a lush, fertile landscape of paradise in many ways, where life was easy compared to the hardships that followed the flood. The earth was abundant, filled with resources, and humanity, being new to creation, seemed to possess knowledge or abilities that have since been lost. But despite the utopian setting, there was also a darker side. Many myths suggest that this era was marked by moral decay, social disobedience, and imbalance, which ultimately led to divine intervention. For instance, in the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Atrahasis epic, the gods decide to flood the earth because humans had become too noisy and disruptive, upsetting the divine order. In the Judeo-Christian tradition, the Bible describes the Antediluvian period as a time when human civilization made great strides but also descended into a culture of sin. According to Native American Hopi beliefs, people had turned away from spiritual balance, focusing too much on materialism. In Chinese folklore, the pre-flood world was chaotic, with rivers overflowing and causing widespread suffering. African and Mesoamerican myths, such as those from the Tutsi and the Aztecs, often describe the pre-flood world as overpopulated and in need of cleansing. So what was life like for the people of that time? What did they do? According to the Bible, the first Antediluvian family was that of Adam and Eve, who, after being expelled from the Garden of Eden, had sons and daughters. Their first son, Cain, is not only known as the first human born on earth, but also the first murderer, having killed his brother Abel. After this grave sin, Cain was marked by God and went on to build a city in the land of Nod, naming it after his son Enoch. This city, according to Sumerian creation myths, is referred to as Eridu and is considered the first city of human civilization. The Bible makes it clear that humans were created with the ability to think, innovate, and make moral decisions. Contrary to some scientific theories which suggest a slow evolution into modern humans, the biblical narrative tells us that the first humans were fully developed, capable of great achievements from the start. Cain, the first person born on earth, built a city, and his descendants were responsible for significant inventions. But could it be that these early humans possessed knowledge far beyond what we know today? The moral decay and corruption of the Antediluvian world ultimately led to the Great Flood, a divine judgment that swept away the old world. But what kind of wisdom, what kind of spiritual connection, and what kind of abilities were lost with it? These are the questions that continue to intrigue and baffle us. The world before the flood was one of great potential, but also great downfall, a time of human achievement overshadowed by sin and destruction. With Jubal and Tubal-Cain, antediluvian society learned to live in tents, to breed herds of cattle, to develop the arts with the use of musical instruments, and to forge tools through working with copper and iron. Zillah also had a son, Tubal-Cain, who forged all kinds of tools out of bronze and iron. Tubal-Cain's sister was Naamah. Later in Noah's time, the Bible shows how he already had the capacity and the necessary resources to build a large ark, according to divine instructions. Therefore, although the Bible does not provide many details about this period, it is clear that there was strong technological and cultural development in the antediluvian world. Many people wonder about the duration of the pre-flood era, but the Bible remains silent on this issue. However, numerous scholars suggest that the time span from the world's creation to the flood might have been longer than the remainder of biblical history. Attempts have been made to date this period, but without reaching a conclusion. In fact, the only source providing any chronological information about the pre-flood era is the genealogical list in Genesis chapter 5. Surprisingly, these stories from this period often feature larger-than-life characters, some of whom are said to have lived for hundreds of years. One of the most notable figures from the Judeo-Christian tradition is Methuselah, known for his remarkably long lifespan. He was the son of Enoch and the grandfather of Noah, and he is primarily known for his astonishingly long lifespan of 969 years. When Methuselah had lived 187 years, he became the father of Lamech. Methuselah lived after the birth of Lamech for 782 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Methuselah were 969 years, and he died. But he is not the only one who lived for so long. Here's some more quotes from the Bible. When Adam had lived 130 years, he had a son in his own likeness, in his own image, and he named him Seth. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived a total of 930 years, and then he died. After he became the father of Methuselah, Enoch walked faithfully with God for 300 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Enoch lived a total of 365 years. Enoch walked faithfully with God. Then he was no more because God took him away. Based on the family tree data in Genesis chapter 5, we can see that people back then lived for a very long time, varying from 800 to 300 years. Is it possible that because they lived so long, they had plenty of time to learn new things and make progress in technology in other areas? Most Christians believe that these people really did live for hundreds of years, just like the Bible says. But the question is, how was it possible? Some scholars and theologians argue that the extreme ages of the antediluvian figures could be symbolic, perhaps emphasizing their divine favor or wisdom. Others speculate on a different environmental context that could have supported longer human lifespans, and in fact the answer might be in the Bible itself. In other cultures too, there are tales of kings and sages who lived for centuries, imparting wisdom and guiding their people. In Mesopotamian tradition, figures like Utnapishtim were considered wise and God-favored humans who survived the deluge. According to the Epic of Gilgamesh, the gods decide to send a flood to wipe out humanity. But Utnapishtim is forewarned by god Ea and builds a massive boat to save himself, his family, and all animals. After surviving the deluge, he and his wife are granted immortality by the gods. The Sumerian king list, perhaps one of the most important ancient texts, perfectly describes a time in history before the flood where God kings ruled for thousands of years. One of the most interesting details about this Sumerian king list is the fact that the earliest list describes 8 kings who ruled the earth for a total of 241,000 years, with the original authority said to have come down from heaven until the time of the great flood that swept away mankind, and after it once again royal authority was cast down from heaven. Here is a part of the king's list. After the power came down from heaven, it was in Eneridu that Alalim became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Elijah ruled for 36,000 years, and after him, their 2 kings ruled for 64,800 years. Just note that we're not talking about hundreds but thousands of years here. Many myths suggest a closer relationship between humans and gods, or even direct interaction and intermingling. According to the Bible, in the time before the flood, 2 main lineages represented the spiritual divide among humanity: the godly lineage of Seth and the ungodly lineage of Cain, the first son of Adam, who killed his own brother and thus committed the first murder. The Sethis were considered the keepers of godliness, a group that valued and upheld their relationship with God. Unfortunately, as this lineage mixed with the descendants of Cain who were not God-fearing, a spiritual decay set in that became unbearable. It was like mixing water with oil. The two could not coexist peacefully, and the end result was a society increasingly moving away from God. But even in this dark period, there were bright spots of spirituality. Abel was one such figure. His sincere offering to God made him a symbol of faithfulness, and he became the world's first martyr. His example of devotion was so impactful that it was still being talked about in New Testament times. Enoch was another remarkable individual. He was so close to God, walking in constant communion with him, that he was said to have been taken up by God, bypassing death entirely. But what is more interesting is that during this period the Bible speaks of enigmatic figures known as the Nephilim. The Nephilim were on earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God went into the daughters of humans who bore children to them. These were the heroes that were of old, warriors of renown. Is it possible that this is the answer to the mystery with the long lifespan of certain biblical figures? In the book of Enoch, the Nephilim are closely linked to the Watchers, who were fallen angels that descended to earth and mated with human women. According to this text, these celestial beings taught mankind various forms of knowledge that were considered forbidden, ranging from astrology and divination to metallurgy. Their offspring with human women were the Nephilim, described as giants who were violent and corrupt, consuming all they encountered. Here is a notable passage from the book of Enoch, chapters 6 to 7. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose our wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And they became pregnant, and they bore great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. The book of Enoch thus elaborates on the cryptic passages in Genesis by offering a much more detailed account of the Nephilim and the Watchers, casting them as figures of corruption and attributing to them much of the wickedness that eventually led to the great flood. But these giants were not only wicked, as they also helped humanity. One of the central themes in the book of Enoch is the imparting of forbidden knowledge to humans. The Watchers are said to have taught humanity various forms of knowledge that were intended to remain celestial secrets. This includes the arts of weapon making, divination, astrology, and other practices considered sinful or disruptive to the natural order. In chapter 8 it is mentioned, moreover, Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, brass plates, the fabrication of mirrors, and the workmanship of bracelets and ornaments, the workmanship, the use of stones of every valuable and select kind, and of all sorts of deeds, so that the world became altered. The book also elaborates on the violence and moral corruption that overwhelmed the earth due to the influence of the Watchers and their offspring. In chapter 7 it states, "Then they took wives, each choosing for himself, whom they began to approach, and with whom they cohabited, teaching them sorcery, incantations, and the dividing of fruits and trees. And they conceiving brought forth giants, whose stature was each 300 cubits. These devoured all what the labor of men produced, until it became impossible to feed them. Then they turned themselves against men, in order to devour them, and began to endure birds, beasts, reptiles, and fishes to eat their flesh one after another, and to drink their blood." According to Enoch, the moral and spiritual degradation reached such a level that divine intervention became necessary, culminating in the Great Flood as described in biblical account in Genesis. In Greek mythology, there's a similar figure to Enoch named Prometheus. Now Prometheus, a titan, defied gods by stealing fire and giving it to humanity, symbolizing his role as a benefactor and a bringer of knowledge. This act of challenging the gods and bestowing wisdom on humans echoes the Watcher's actions in the Book of Enoch. This suggests that tales of divine beings interacting with humans before the flood, sharing forbidden knowledge, and suffering consequences for their transgressions are common across different mythologies. Greek mythology is also full of giants, powerful and monstrous beings who fought against the gods. Similarly, in the books of Enoch and Genesis 6, we see giants created when divine beings mate with human women. Though we can't find a direct birth story of a god and a mortal woman creating giants, the character Gilgamesh from the Mesopotamian epos, who was 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, seems to hint at a common theme. In the Sumerian mythology, there are also stories of heavenly beings that came to earth and communicated with humans, but they're called the Anunnaki. However, unlike the Watchers, in Mesopotamian myths like the Epic of Gilgamesh, the Anunnaki were said to have created humans as laborers and had interactions with them. According to Zecharia Sitchin's hypothesis, they came to Earth to mine gold and created humans to perform the task. This theory is controversial but provides evidence that the Anunnaki were the original creators of mankind. The Anunnaki claim to have come from their planet Nibiru and could travel through stargates and wormholes. Zecharia Sitchin also claimed that the Sumerians learned astrology from the Anunnaki, which gave them a deep understanding of our solar system, including Venus and Saturn, and even depicted a 10th planet called Nibiru. Heroes like Abel, Enoch, and Noah emerged as beacons in a morally clouded world, each in his own way, embodying the virtues that would later be rekindled in the post-flood civilization. It is this bright contrast that makes the antediluvian world an eternal subject of inquiry and reflection. Its end by cataclysmic flood isn't just an account of divine retribution, but a reminder of the cyclical nature of human experience. Like the sedimentary layers left behind by receding waters, the stories and lessons from this time have been compressed into the bedrock of our shared consciousness. They warn us of the perils of spiritual waywardness while simultaneously inspiring for the untapped potentials of human endeavor. In this way, the antediluvian era serves as a cosmic mirror reflecting both the brilliance and the shadows of humanity. It proclaims a timeless message: though we may fall, there's always a chance for a new beginning. So as we navigate our own complexities and uncertainties, may we heed the wisdom echoing from this distant past, applying its lessons in our present to build a future that harmonizes both the wonders of human achievement and the nobility of spiritual purpose. Keep your minds open until we meet again. Bye.